Okay, well, starting now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's very good to see you all, and hope you've enjoyed a really lovely sunny St. George's Day. Now, a very warm welcome to John and Carrie, who have worked hard as the Mayor and Mayoress of Salisbury over the past 2 years, throughout a challenging period. They hand over next month to their successors, and we very much look forward to hearing what they have to say. And thank you, John and Carrie. Over to you.
Thank you, Ian, and good evening to everybody. I don't think there's anybody there. I don't know. I really feel that I'm among friends. Obviously, we're very honoured to be asked to give this talk, but have to confess straight away that we plagiarised the title for this talk from a book given to us by Bruce and Jane Court 2 years ago. And there it is. Again, you may not be able to read it. So it says, What the Mayoress Saw by Molly Maidment, Mayoress in 1958. And as you can see, she talked there about chained to Sarum. So a little bit of a switch to chained to Salisbury. But that's been a very interesting read, actually, to see what happened in 1958. I'd recommend it. Anyway, we hope you enjoy our overview of our time in office. I'm now going to hand over to the Mayoress.
Well, 3.5 years ago, I would never have imagined how my life would change. Marriage, relocation from the Sussex Weald to the lovely city of Salisbury, a rapid immersion into local life and politics, and the dawning realisation that John, when he proposed, had said quite casually, by the way, I might be mayor one day. He had not been joking, and it would become a reality and not a vague forecast. Little did I know what lay ahead.
So, as you can see, I wasn't joking, although in the world of politics, nothing is certain. But it's certainly been a great privilege to serve as a city mayor for 2 years, May 19 to May 21. We feel honoured to share with the Friends of St. Lawrence our experiences and to reveal some of what goes on behind the scenes. We hope you too will enjoy reminiscing about the highlights of the last couple of years. So, no more ado, I'm now going to hand back to Carrie, my technical expert.
Well, I hope it won't be death by PowerPoint and that the slides will enhance our talk. So, first things first, let's start off with John.
Right, here we go. The first mayor recorded is a Robert Pictor in 1249. But successors were not recorded until 1337, and then the list is complete to the present day. So that makes me, as you can see there on the screen, 759th Mayor of Salisbury to hold office. The appointment is normally only for 1 year. However, one mayor who managed to survive the plague did at least 2 years. And in fact, in the First World War, Mayor Macklin served for 6 years. I don't know how he did it, because I'm struggling after 2. But there you go. And he, of course, quite rightly had a road named after him. You may have heard of Macklin Road, which is off Highbury Avenue. And he's got a blue plaque as well, although that actually is more to do with the buildings which were put up there. So what does the city expect of its mayor? As you might well guess, it's clearly laid down in the Civic Handbook that the 2 distinct tasks for the mayor are as follows. 1, to chair meetings of the council in an orderly way with regards to statutory obligations and council constitution. 2, secondly, to preside as ceremonial head of the whole council over its civic functions and social occasions. That also encompasses the promotion of the city to raise its profile, encourage citizenship, celebrate success, host VIPs and events, and to support a chosen charity. The mayor also acts as signatory to the council's official seal on documents as required. The mayoress supports the mayor, accompanies him on engagements, makes sure he's got his flyers done up, and God bless her, has organised our charity, Mayor's Charity, more of which later. So, how did I become mayor? I first got involved in 1996, when I'd been in the city since 1992. Catherine, who many of you will remember, was approached by a lady called Beryl J, who's on the left there, to become her mayoress, because Beryl didn't have a partner. And I found myself in the role of husband to the mayoress, looking after the children and doing a bit of cooking in between, and keeping the home fires burning, while Catherine operated with Beryl for a year. And then actually after that, Beryl became chairman of the Wiltshire Council and also of the district councils, as we had it in those days. So we had about 6 years of public duties. And then at the end, literally almost at the end of that, in 2002, Beryl's cancer returned. And I was called in by her pretty much on her deathbed. And she said to me, "John, I think you'd make a good councillor. I'd like you to stand in my ward because there was going to be a by-election." Well, what is a gentleman to do? So I turned to the right, saluted, and marched off and stood in the ward as a councillor. And I think perhaps people thought, well, gosh, he's not very good, but if he's been trained by Beryl J, who was an extremely good councillor, we'll give him a go. And that's what they've done from that day to this. So I do have a distinction. I do have one distinction. I have been married to 2 mayoresses, because of course, at the bottom picture, you can see a lovely picture of the bride and myself on our wedding day. And that was, what, 3.5 years ago, darling?
Yep.
Right, moving on then, mayor making. Now that is when you make the mayor, fairly obviously, and that is quite a big event. And you can see, if you look top left, you can see John Glenn and the High Sheriff and Tom Copley and all moving down to St Thomas's Church in a great procession, accompanied by all the councillors. And it isn't a religious service, although it's held in the church, and it's quite appropriate to be in the church because St Thomas's is very much the parish church of the city. And there you can see me bending over, not to have my head chopped off, but to have the chain handed over to me by my predecessor, Councillor Mike Osmond. And then you've got a lovely picture, particularly of the deputy mayor on the left there, Councillor Caroline Corbyn, who is going to be stepping up, we hope, to be mayor on May the 17th in a very small ceremony. That, of course, depends. She has, of course, to get elected. So we're all holding our breath and hoping she will be, because she's a very good councillor. Right, back to this was the mayor making coming back from the church, and you can see there a whole variety of people, from the scouts and the guides. There's a beadle at the front, gentleman in a yellow jacket on. His job in the old days was to sort of clear the way for the mayor as the mayor promenaded round his city, because the mayor used to be very much the top person running the city. And of course, probably people probably didn't like him, so the beadles went with him to protect him. And of course, down at the bottom there, we have introduced a town crier, and you can see him there at the front, the gentleman in blue, and he announced the election of the mayor, and we haven't had much use of him in the last year, sadly.
Having had all the photographs taken, we're into the Guildhall for the celebrations, which everybody was looking forward to at lunchtime. So it starts in the morning with a morning reception for all the dignitaries and VIPs and various speeches. And that probably lasts till 2 o'clock. And also on the Sunday, we have a formal civic lunch for those who are invited. But the evening was the great celebration. A mayor can choose what he wants to do, and we have the use of the Guildhall. So we decided that we would celebrate with a dinner dance to launch our charity. And as you can see, we've got a crowd in there, something like 126 people seated, Salisbury big band. After the meal and the speeches, we cleared some of the tables and we all had a jolly good dance to proper music, and everybody thoroughly enjoyed themselves.
Right. One of the things we did at this event was launch the Mayor's charity appeal, which, as you can see, is South Wilts Mencap. I've always been had a soft spot for South Wilts Mencap, partly because I have a sister who has severe Down syndrome, and I've been chair of the charity, volunteered for years, so it was the appropriate one. And of course, the whole business of the charity is partly to raise money, but I think the main thing is to raise the profile of the charity. So it helps other citizens to realise what's going on in this part. And so that's why we, one of the reasons I went for South Wilts Mencap. And as you can see, a lot of our members were thrilled to be dressing up, and we all had a great evening as they came along to the function in the evening.
Oh, we actually raised about £4,000 that night, which was a great start to our charity.
Right. Well, within 4 or 5 days of mayor making, we were off to Xanten, which is our twinning town in Germany. And we drove out there with a whole busload of other members from Salisbury. We arrived. Look, we've got vast, huge connections with the town of Xanten. We've been doing it now for years. 1 year they come to us. The next year we go to them. And as you can see, it's a number of people. On the right there was myself with the mayor of Xanten, Thomas Goetz. And then you can see where we went. There's a Kerr Park. It's a sort of great big park around the city, and we opened that with the help of the bishop and the mayor. And then down the bottom, there's a picture of a family who came to visit us last year. So this is if you've got I'm sure a few of you might have grandchildren. This is the sort of thing where, you know, if they're not too far away, they live in Salisbury, we could go and you could go out to Germany. Right.
So we spent the afternoon walking around the Kerr Park, which is actually the moat that's been filled in and has made a wonderful walk and recreation area. But of course, John was attracted to the ladies and the ladies seemed to be attracted to him. I think it was the bling.
If only.
In the top right-hand corner, we'd all been asked to take some British and Salisbury food, and we had a little British stall there serving the products, and it was cleared out pretty quickly. And there at the bottom, you can see some of the trusty people who we were on the coach with who all came. It was a great 2 or 3 days, and we were looked after very well.
And so to work, because despite what you may think, the mayor works extremely hard, and the mayoress even harder. So the council, you should be aware, the council provides a corporation services officer, to give him his correct title, who advises me about requests for appearances, deals with the correspondence, and keeps the diary. The officer works closely with Carrie. And
I have to make sure that we are in the right place at the right time, in the right dress, briefed, and speech at the ready. And quite often there are speeches which of course need to be prepared. So hence the label. I've got something like 5 big A4 folders and umpteen different folders that cover the planning and the briefings for the various meetings that we've been to. So that's an additional side of it. And I work very closely on the charity support as well.
In fact, the Mayoress is the perfect staff officer. God bless her. Right. One of the things the Mayor gets involved with is, as you can see, monthly citizenship ceremonies. You'll be intrigued to discover that people pay quite a lot of money to become citizens, and they also have to pass a test, which I think would stretch some of us, or should I speak for myself? But it's a great occasion, usually about a dozen each time. The Deputy Lord Lieutenant comes along and we go through this sort of ceremony, which is great. Moving on.
Yes, I think I've been to a couple of these and I've been fascinated at how much people have to go through to actually become citizens of the UK. Written tests, financial costs, adjusting to life in the UK, and they really are committed. It's quite heartwarming. Okay, so at 9 o'clock start, one sunny June morning saw us deliberating over which of 12 gleaming, beautiful Maseratis of all vintages deserved the prize for elegance. The Maserati Club of France had decided that Salisbury needed cheering up after the Novichok, and a rally to the UK was called for. I think it was any excuse. They carefully guided our selection, everyone was happy, and the winner went off with no less than a print of Salisbury Cathedral. Later in the year, of course, we've had the Car Fest, which is very popular in the Market Square, and John just could not resist sitting in that Morgan, I think it's a Morgan, and I thought his jaunty boater and striped blazer cut quite a dash, but it was a bit of fun.
Right. Well, I remember when I looked in May, April, in fact, a little earlier than that, sort of March 2019, there didn't seem to be much happening in my year. There were no royalty coming or anything like that, and it was all fairly quiet. However, as events proved, it did turn out to be rather different from what I anticipated. And the Armed Forces Day, which, as we all know, Salisbury picked up at fairly short notice, was very much one of the big events of the year. And as you can see, you see me there with my other girlfriend in the middle there. And I even had 20 minutes with her standing on the stadium while lots of people marched past, as you can see on the right there. It was a great occasion. In fact, it went on. It wasn't just the 3 days of the Armed Forces Day I was involved in, but there were numerous other events connected with it. And we can see one at the top there where the start of the whole event was, you know, sort of warning the citizens off that it was coming. And that took place a couple of months before. There were various other events. And if you look top right now, there's Lieutenant Colonel Guy Benson, who masterminded it all. And he was extremely good. And generally, I very much enjoyed it because I felt very much at home with the military. So it wasn't too difficult. It was a great 3 days.
Right.
Now, here we are, some pictures of what, as you all know, it was very hot. And of course, trundling around in my robes, it was very hot indeed. However, we got round. Top left, you can see a fantastic cake, which was made by a local catering firm for SAFA and was duly auctioned off. I was only sorry I didn't win it, but it wouldn't have been any good for my waistline. And there are various other pictures there, including a picture down the bottom. I'm sure many of you give blood, and I because of the nature of my blood, I give platelets. And so I was quite intrigued to see the sort of motorbike that my platelets had taken away on to wherever they needed. So that was quite interesting. And of course, we also went round. It was a great opportunity to visit military displays. We talked to many of the companies contracted and supporting the military, because this was the time when they were starting to build all these new houses at Lark Hill and Tidworth and elsewhere. And we also talked to scientific and arms companies. So it is quite a lot of just talking to people and making them feel important. So we also had various other things going on, including official drinks, tattoos, the beating retreat on Old Sarum. So that was the Armed Forces Day, a great occasion for all.
3 days covered at great speed. However, the next event of importance was our twin visit to Saintes. We've been invited to help them celebrate Bastille Day, and it was a scorching hot weekend. The town is absolutely beautiful, quite delightful. It has lots of Roman ruins and a big amphitheatre, and we were expertly hosted by our Twinning Association members there, who are largely expats, and they arranged a non-stop programme of sightseeing and gargantuan long meals on shady terraces. And the mayor, Monsieur Machon, had kindly invited us. But of course, it started with a formal welcome on the Friday night at the town hall.
Which, as you can see the top left, you can see the German mayor in the background, and myself and the mayoress. And what happened, and I'm happy to admit this, my French is pretty rubbish. And so I did the first couple of lines in French, and then I very gratefully handed over to Carrie, who then did the rest of the speech in impeccable French. So full marks to her, and my God, I'm glad that she was around to help me. The Bastille Day parade was interesting. Most of their local militia had been deployed to Paris to take part in their great celebrations up there. So the result was we had lots of local organisations taking part, which is great. Emergency services with all their vehicles, and a drive past of vintage Citroens. The fact we both have Citroens has got nothing to do with it. Local and regional dancers of all ages, as you can see there. And there was even some dancers on stilts who danced down on cobbles, would you believe? No one fell off. And the town continued to party until the stunning midnight fireworks show. And then we took a couple of days off on the way home to go visit the D-Day landing beaches, particularly Omaha. And that, again, was very moving, as you can see from there was a British cemetery, but of course there was a huge American cemetery as well. Somebody's got their, it's not muted, but we're getting a bit of coughing going on. Right, on we go.
So it's very hard when you've got hundreds of engagements in the book to say what should we cover, and that was actually dictated by what photographs we had. So they're very varied. The top left-hand one, if you look very closely, was part of a Pillars of Faith exhibition at St. Paul's Church, where local children had designed to cover the pillars with stories from the Bible, and very well done they were too. We've also did quite a lot of fundraising, going to visit our fundraisers. That's second troop of scouts who were helping out there in Tesco's. The SPA Award, SPA FM Business Awards, was quite a fantastic evening, and it was so heartening to hear all these young entrepreneurs talk about how they'd started their businesses and grown them, and everybody felt really energized by that. And then if you drop down to the second row on the left-hand side, we get quirky things like, please would we drop in on a diamond wedding, and would we also give flowers to a lady who's 100, and so on. That happens quite a bit.
Right, moving on then, you'll see in the centre picture me holding a sign saying fixed. And that was all about this business of trying to encourage people not to throw everything away, but to have it mended. And that was going on at that time. Interesting enough, I heard it on Radio 4 just yesterday, and they were saying how marvellous it was. Well, we started this in Salisbury 18 months ago. Then to the right-hand side, we went to Julia's house hospice, myself and the leader. We used to work together on a number of events with our ladies, and obviously nice to support Julia's house, and we did that. Then down on the bottom left, we've got the whole business of electric cars, which I know we're all thinking of buying, but I'm not quite sure about it yet in some cases. And then finally on the right, the mobility, shop mobility, where of course if you are getting to the stage, as some of us are starting to, where walking is not a particularly nice option around the city, then they've got all the kit you need to whiz round and see how many pedestrians you can knock down. Then we go on to the chain gang. Very simply, as mayors, you get together with other mayors and you support them and they support you. And we'll talk more about that in a moment, what we did in Salisbury. But there you can see some pictures of the Mayor of Verwood's Christmas reception on the 1st December 2019. The Chippenham reception, bottom left, with a naval cadet there. And then we had a very interesting time going, when we went to Marlborough, because they had the Sealed Knot there, which is one of these reenactment organisations. In this case, they tend to do Roundheads and Cavaliers. And Marlborough has the advantage of having a large field just above it, which is very close to the town. And they had this huge battle going on up there. And there was a suggestion we'd bring it to Salisbury, but it never took off because, of course, Huddersfield is so far from the centre. I think it was felt that it wouldn't be a goer. And then, of course, COVID came along. But it may be something we'll resurrect. But
it was actually a fantastic afternoon, and it was really enjoyable seeing all these Cavaliers and Roundheads swaggering through the streets, watching foot soldiers drill, and generally having a high old time. And the fight on the common with mounted cavalry and pikemen was quite something to behold. So that was a good day.
And on a slightly different theme, of course, this period, the last couple of years, has seen a number of events. 2019 marked the 75th anniversary of D-Day, top left, and obviously Remembrance Sunday, VJ Day. And then in 2020, of course, we had the 75th anniversary of VE Day and VJ Day. But of course, we had problems there because, of course, this was the COVID time. And in a moment, Carrie will be telling you a little bit about how we got around that. And before I invite you to do that, I'll just mention the Remembrance Sunday. I have to say, I was determined that that was going to continue, whatever COVID was doing, because I thought it really important that that should not slide down as so many other things had to. So I'm glad to say the government fell into line and agreed with my plans about a week before they actually came to fruition. So we were able to do that, although obviously with a much reduced number of people. But back to the arrangements for getting things out.
Well, VJ Day morphed into a broadcast from St Thomas's Church, which meant, of course, that I had to turn cameraman. But one of the problems we faced was how could John read his notes and nobody see him doing it? So I concocted this very Heath Robinson affair of coffee tables, laundry basket, tablecloths, etc. And where the book is, I put the computer and filmed him from there. And as you see from the bottom left-hand corner, it all came out perfectly. and our grandson was most intrigued to see Grandad talking allegedly without notes and with the words coming up on the screen in front of him. One of the most striking things too for Remembrance Day was when the Guildhall was lit up. I don't know how many people managed to see that. Oh, over to me again. Now look, John is looking rather suave as a James Bond lookalike, I think, or that's what he thought. But the Sir Optimist International had been dormant for a number of years in Salisbury, and they decided to relaunch it again. And John was asked to do that ceremony, and it was followed by a very nice dinner in the cloisters. What an atmosphere as the skies darkened, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. And much to my surprise, a couple of months later, I was asked to launch Her Salisbury Story, which is an ongoing project from Salisbury Sir Optimist, where we are researching and also interviewing and recording women who have contributed to Salisbury life in some way. I have actually trained as one of the interviewers, and I'll shortly be interviewing the author Susan Howard, whose series of 5 novels set in Salisbury Close are really quite a riveting and quite a naughty read at times, but I do recommend them. I'll be very intrigued to see what comes out in the interview. But that's been good fun, and all the interviews will be recorded in the National and in the Swindon archives, and there will be an exhibition in Salisbury Museum, so we've got that to look forward to as well.
Right, here we go. Salisbury Civic Day, which is usually held each year. And again, you remember I mentioned about Marlborough and they're having functions going on and showing off Marlborough. Well, obviously I was keen to show off Salisbury, particularly important because it was 1 year on from the Novichok incident. And of course, a lot of people probably thought we were still down on our knees. Well, of course, we weren't. We were up and running. And it was my job as your mayor to make sure that all the other mayors who came to visit would be able to go back to their towns and cities and say, yeah, it's all going well. So I planned a tour. I started off with a tour around the Guildhall. Then we were off to visit Nicholas and Harris, who are a large bakery. And the top left doesn't show us in a hospital. They're actually going around their premises, but as you can see, very safely. And we then moved to the Salisbury Playhouse, had a look at that backstage, which I'd never done. I was always interested to see that. And lunch, onto the cathedral, guided tours round the cathedral, followed by a really very nice service, and then cream teas. And as you can see, the various mayors and their wives, etc., in front of the Guildhall.
That was a great day.
It was. Okay, the Charter Fair comes to town every year, and as you can see, it gives the mayor an opportunity to be silly, pictures left and right, and also the vicar of St Thomas's, very nice gentleman, Kelvin Inglis. He, as you can see, is leaping around doing dodgems, having blessed the Charter Mark Affair, and with me opened it. It's all organised by the Showman's Guild, who bring in all these devices from all over the place. And they, of course, really must have suffered this year because, of course, there's not been anything like that happening, which is a great shame. And there you can see, bottom right, they provide a dinner, which they sort of make sure that we are going to let them come back the following year, but we always do.
Well, Carnival, held every year to collect money for the Mayor's charity. It's very popular, lots of floats, and I think I've jumped in ahead of John. But as you can see, it was a
wet night. One of the things we discovered is that throughout our various commitments, and the putting the lights on was another one, it poured with rain every single time, which wasn't good news for those who wanted to come and watch what is a fantastic event. And if you haven't been to the Carnival, which takes place sort of October time on a sort of Friday night, it's not just got local floats in it as it wanders through the streets, but also some really big professional ones, and it really is amazing to see. We sometimes have to take down the traffic lights to make sure that we can get the bigger ones around the corners.
But that night it rained so hard, our buckets were half full of water, and we had to get towels from home to dry the coins. And sadly, our collection was down by about 50% of what would normally be taken for the Mayor's charity. So be it. quick slide. People often say, what about your hats, Carrie? Well, there's a selection. I have got one or two more, and I'm not going to tell you how many shoes I've got. I'm not trying to beat Mrs. Imelda
Marcos,
but I have got a few pairs to find the comfy ones, you understand.
I'm going to make no comment at this point, but move hurriedly on to what was, I think, in one of the real highlights of our year. The charity, South Wales Men Cap, had in our president, Lady Ruth Hawley, a really good president who showed her worth by arranging for Sophie, not the Duchess, the Countess of Wessex, to come and attend a tea party for our members to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the founding of the club by local parents in Salisbury. And there you could see from a quick glance at the pictures how much fun everybody was having. Lovely picture there, bottom right, of Sophie with some of our members. And we're going to hand over to Carrie in a moment, who's going to tell you a little bit about the bottom picture. But we had one of our club members sang for us, a gorgeous tenor voice. And really, it was a fantastic afternoon. And in fact, it was borne out by the officer who runs the lieutenancy for the Lord Lieutenant. And he said it was the best event he'd been to that year, because it really was fantastic.
It really was good fun. And in fact, just to let you know that the committee prepared tea, vintage tea for 60 members, the carers and guests, served it. It was all home produced food, and it was just lovely. We had a vintage singer. We also had held a Christmas card competition for our mayoral Christmas card. And here you can see one of the girls having a laugh with David Scott, who was the High Sheriff at the time. A great afternoon. Oh, this is back to me. Just talking about the events that we have, there's quite a lot that goes on behind the scenes, as you can imagine. And it's a real steep learning curve to get into event management, transforming the top slide into something like the one on the right in the bright pink. And if you're able to look closely, you'll see there that we've got A-frames on which we had acrobats for part of our comedy night. Graham Fry, who is the corporate manager for the Guildhall, was having kittens. And when I also said, could I have a fire eater outside, he was a little bit worried. But it's a great time. He's very helpful. And my partner in crime with this is Emma Harper, who's secretary to South Wales Men Cap. There's a lot goes on behind the scenes.
Right, now there's more engagements, as you can see. I know Ian runs a very tight ship, and I know we've only got 4 minutes of talking left, so we're going to have to skid along at a fair pace. So you can see the top left was, we were invited to Diwali, the Indian community's event every year, most interesting. In the middle, we've got myself shaking, cutting the ribbon, the new cemetery, it varied if nothing else, and so on. We've got the Monopoly there. We helped launch that, because if you don't know, there's a Salisbury Monopoly now, so there's something for grandchildren, and various other things, including a pancake race in the cloisters. It was raining that day, of course, and it was raining on the right, so we won't go on. Let's move on to the next one. And this, again, we did educational things as well, Wiltshire College graduation ceremony. We then had something which is very much worth a mention, because my wife was one of them. In the old days, if you became a teacher, you got a certificate of education, and that was it. 2 or 3 years after she finished being a teacher, stopped training, they gave a degree, and they decided to award degrees to all those people who had never been given one up to 1978. So that took place there, and you can see there with Mary Paisley, who's a past mayoress and was involved with the College of St Sarah and St Michael. And again, bottom left, we did a thing with the primary school. We were asked to produce our toys. One or two of you might recognise those. And then there was a STEM exhibition, and I was required to sit there, and this machine whizzed round, and it sort of gave you a sort of feeling as if you were in a mixer. Okay, sorry, we can't wait any longer for that.
And then COVID struck. We had actually gone on holiday to Egypt, and COVID was rumbling along in the background. We looked very happy there. We didn't know what we were coming back to. But certainly by the 23rd of March, the diary was closing. Events were cancelled in big red letters. And we were, all of us, I think, learning new skills. Join Zoom. My grandson was trying to tell me what to do. And many events had to be held online. And I think we should congratulate ourselves, all of us, for mastering Zoom and meetings. We held a quiz. The bottom left-hand corner was a virtual non-event for Elaborate, raising money, provide your own champagne and make a big donation. Took 15 minutes and raised them quite a lot of money.
About £6,000, I believe.
Yeah, and we also spent time relaxing in that lovely summer, John gardening, and I sorted the garage out. So time well spent.
Right, well, we did try and keep some things going, and you can see there the launch of the Salisbury 2020, which of course was the cathedral's big function. And of course the whole thing fell apart, but they did their best, as we've all done. And that was actually before COVID, that picture at the top left. They asked me to do a little bit about the Mayor's view on the whole business of 2020. The 800 years, and by lucky chance, as you know, I live where I can get a view of Old Sarum. So I was able to talk, and you can see me talking there, but you can see the cheat on the left, thanks to Carrie, who set up that string. In fact, she's going to tell you a bit more about it now.
It's a very Heath Robinson affair again. John wanted to read his speech outside, 4 pages of it, and he wanted to be able to see it, nothing, no lectern, nothing. However, we managed. But what did interrupt us was the cyclists shouting out as they went past, "What's the Mayor up to now?" and people peering over the fence. So that was quite funny.
Mm. Right, and just on the top right, there was a lovely lady called Sue Allenby who wrote a book, and all the profits went to the cathedral, all about Elias, thank you, of Dereham, who was the chief architect. I mean, it's well worth reading. It's in the bookshops if you want to look at it. Okay. Finally, Christmas. Did everybody recognise the top left picture? I was taught, as a mayor, you shouldn't get involved with children and animals. But I seem to have broken the rule on that one. Christmas, therefore, 2019. And then on the right-hand side, those marvellous Christmas trees all around the city, which I thought were a great success in 20. And then also our Christmas card to lots of people on the bottom left. And finally, St. Thomas's had a lovely crib, of which you can see the example there. But Christmas in 2019 had about 15 carol concerts we went to and enjoyed every one of them. But 2020 was rather quieter in that respect. Everything was done by Zoom, almost. But there you go. Right, nearly there. Here's just an example of a letter I wrote
It's almost the last event.
To Prince Philip, to the private secretary, expressing the city's regrets that Prince Philip had died, and you can see the sort of letter that I get involved in sending on your behalf. And then there was a very nice service in the cathedral, which, as you can see there again, was held to commemorate the Duke of Edinburgh's life. There we go then. Lockdown is easing. There's myself and the Mayoress outside Crown Decorating Centres, who just opened a shop. If you're into Crown paints, they seem very well organised. I was very impressed. And they're next to the Dulux Centre, which is down in just off the Southampton Road. I've got the name of it now, Meadow something or other, but it's not desperately important. I'm sure you'll find it. So thank you, by the way, to the village and to all of you listening now for your support. I know a number of you came along to events, and we're very grateful for that. So now the plan is, unless I'm mistaken, is to hand back to Ian and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Well, thank you, John and Carrie, for a fascinating talk. And it's very good of you to have shared your experiences. I've only got, we've got time for questions. And so far, I've only had one in the chat box from Rosemary Winston. But we obviously, people might have had trouble. We will then, you know, put your hands up later and ask a question and see how that goes. But Rosemary's question is to John and Carrie. you have so many engagements, John and Carrie. Would a mayoral car and a chauffeur have been helpful?
Oh, yes, yes, definitely. But that went long ago, didn't it?
Well, I was just going to say, believe it or not, there was a memorial car with a driver. It was actually used for funerals most of the time, but it used to turn out to take the mayor and mayoress in, that was in 1996, 97, when my first mayoress did her year. It was a great idea, but I'm afraid it would appear that, that perhaps my fellow citizens took a dim view that the mayor was being carted around to Bournemouth and everywhere else in a car. And now you take your own car, and although they will occasionally provide a taxi or something, but I'm afraid the mighty have fallen, and you know, we don't get a car anymore. So I hope that's reassuring for the you ratepayers that you're not spending money and driving the mayor around. Right, how's that?
That's very good. And I've got a question. While people maybe you can unmute yourselves now, certainly if you want to ask a question. But I've got a question while people are thinking what to ask. Is what was your most memorable event during the 2 years that you've been doing the job?
Oh, I think it was definitely the 60th anniversary tea party that we had with the Countess of Wessex for the charity Southwards Men Cab. There was such a wonderful atmosphere there. The members were so happy, and the carers, and they're still talking about it. So it must have been good.
Yeah, I think we all do good things for people, and you know, you all get involved. Those of you listening in all sorts of events, helping other people. I think that's what made it particularly special for us, because we really felt we were doing something to help others and to make their 60th anniversary, because it's not that easy when you're in the situation our members are in. And it's really nice to have something for them to remember, and we were really chuffed about it.
That's great. I think Mary, my wife Mary might have a question.
One of my questions that came to mind was, if you had to do another 2 years, would you have the strength and the stamina?
Wow.
I think we'd have to find a holiday somewhere first, wouldn't we?
Well, we certainly would, but you notice, yes, because as you know, Mary, I saw that one off because I was concerned, I'm now joking, that I might be invited to yet another year if COVID had been in the ghastly position. But that's why I haven't stood this time round. As many of you may know, I'm now not standing. I felt at 74 that I should hand over to younger people like yourself, Mary, as regards becoming councillors. So I made sure I couldn't be re-elected or kept on as the mayor by standing down on this occasion.
Well, I think you've done a great job, I have to say. I enjoyed your talks. And,
yeah.
Great. Are there any other questions? Please put your hand up and unmute yourself. Has anyone got a question?
There's a couple on the chat.
I'll have a look at the chat. They've come in now. Let me see. I'll see that one. Got them here.
It's from Jane.
I've got one from
Jane.
Carrie. First, I've got one from Carrie. Can you show Jane up to camera and describe it, please?
Ah,
Right.
now you almost, funnily enough, I don't know, hang on, let me see if I take it off, it might be easier. Then you can see the whole thing. I've started at the bottom. There's a great big thing, which dongle, as I call it, on the bottom. And you can see there that
because people don't send it to everyone sometimes.
Somebody's coming in speaking. Anyway, you can see there the sort of 5 rivers business, which is fairly typical of the city, and that's that sort of part of it. And then as you go, you can then see just above the dongle, as I've said, you can see there it's the cathedral. That one there, which Carrie's pointing to, and of course the big connection with it's I forget now. It's connected with the cathedral and the patron there. I'm having the Mother of Jesus. That's it. Sorry, it's slow there. The eagles which go round, you'll notice they're all going round. Nobody has ever worked out what we are doing with the double eagle, because that, of course, tends to be the Russian sign. And there was a suggestion that some mayor fell in love with a Russian lady, but I think this story hasn't really got much traction. So, and then there are a number of others. You can see for instance, there are a couple there, which the coat of arms, because the king's involved. In fact, at this point, I have to admit, I've not been as diligent as I should have been in finding out what they all mean. However, there's good news because in November, the Sarum Chronicle comes out, which I don't suppose many of you knew, and I, to be honest, didn't know much about it before I became mayor. And that is going to do a complete 2 or 3 pages on the chain, and they came and photographed it the other day. So if you can just wait till November, I should be able to come back and tell you what the chain, the fuller story of the chain. One thing I could mention actually, which is, there's this one here, which sits there, and that was put on in 1974 and was presented by Lady Jo Benson, who's married to Chris Benson. Again, many of you have heard of her. And that was put on to commemorate the fact that there was a change in local government in 1974. And as you all know, local government likes to change about every 30 years. And since then, we've had the one in 2009 where we got rid of the district council. Some would say with great regret. We now got the current situation. But I bet you it'll be long after my time. It'll change again in another 30 years. But we won't go there.
You asked, how do we keep it clean? We're not allowed to touch it. It did go off for special cleaning, which took months and cost quite a lot of money during the COVID break.
I don't think the ratepayers want to hear it. It cost about £1,000. Because, yes, it's a lot of money, but it's quite delicate, and there was quite a lot. It hadn't been done for years. So you could argue, split it over the 30 years since it was last looked at. It's not quite so bad, but it wasn't cheap.
My goodness.
Sorry about that, guys.
And I've got another question here. It's from Richard Death. Did you ever have to support an event that you disagreed with politically?
Well, there is one which I refused to take part in, and this was partly because my father fought in Burma. And I have to say that I don't have much sympathy with there was this Hiroshima thing, floating lamps down the river. And I just didn't feel I could do it because I just didn't feel, again, it was what the mayor from Hiroshima was saying about it all. And it's not an area where I have yet to close that chapter in my life. I suppose, as I say, I get that partly from my father, and I shouldn't blame him. It's something for me. But I would stress that mayors do not have to go to every event that they're offered. They can say whether they wish to take it up or not. I never said anything to them. They don't. You're the only people who now know about my thoughts on that particular event. But other than that, I think I accepted everything else which came my way. Or if I couldn't do it for any reason, because of a clash, I sent the deputy mayor, who stands in for the mayor if the mayor can't go because of a clash. So there's my admission to having difficulties over the business of that area. Great.
Jeremy Raven, I think you probably answered this at the beginning, but maybe he missed it. He's asked a question: what first inspired you to run for council? That's one for you, John.
Thank you. Well, Jeremy, lovely to have you on board. Jeremy's a great friend of mine. So I sort of said we were on tonight. Nice of you to join us. It was really, I think it was that, as a soldier, as is Jeremy, I had very little knowledge of local government. In fact, I could safely say I could have put it on a postage stamp and still written a letter on the stamp. So I literally fell into it because of Beryl J, Councillor Beryl J, who asked, we met her to our church, St Paul's, at the time, and she'd seen in Catherine what I'd seen in her, somebody who was very diplomatic and a very good person to support Beryl, who was, and I don't think, although she's dead, she'd mind me saying this, she was a bit of a rough diamond and tended to upset people occasionally. So Catherine used to come behind pouring dollops of oil on the sort of stormy waters, and they were a great team. And it was that, and literally I just got involved with helping Beryl because she wasn't very fit, and as I said, sadly she died in 2002. I would go around delivering leaflets for her and that sort of thing, and so it began to get an interest. But I have to say I was quite shocked when she suggested I should stand in her seat in the by-election, because I was very nervous, but I thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. So that's how I got involved in politics. I can't claim any resounding reason. I always tended my politics to keep it very, I was in the business of helping the local residents sort out yellow lines, some parking problem, potholes, all this sort of small stuff, which I thought I thought that was where I should be. I can't claim that I rushed around trying to change the world. I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, very well. And just apropos of that, there's not a question. This is from Joe Harrison. Just a statement. And like everyone else, she says, like everyone else, I'm sure, we are full of admiration for your efforts, Arnold and Joe. And yes, that came across very well this evening. And I second that. So well done, you guys. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
And there's one from Heather and David Balston, yeah? Are you glad you accepted the duty as a councillor?
Well, I suppose the fact I stuck it out, it's very interesting actually. I was looking at the list of those who are not, quite a lot of people have stood down now after only 4 years, although you could say that's enough. But I think it must be the Irish. I enjoy chatting and generally talking to people. As you can gather, no good at IT, but I'm good at boring people, rigid. I just found that I did actually have a break because having been elected for 6.5 years, as I say, my residents thought that was enough of a joke. Let's drop him. So they did in 2009. I didn't get in. I think the political scene at the time wasn't particularly helpful to the Labour Party. And I then had a 4-year break, which actually was quite useful because sadly, Catherine had died in 2007. And I'd got to the point where answering the telephone wasn't something I particularly wanted to do. And you think to yourself, well, in that case, it's probably better to stop being councillor. So the fact I was thrown out was, or should we say, not re-elected, was a good thing. But then what happened was in 2013, I couldn't resist the temptation to have another go. And much to my surprise, I got in by, are you ready for this, 1 vote. So it does, so in my ward at least, I can't speak to the rest of you, democracy does count. And I've had endless people come up to me and say, Councillor Walsh, it was my 1 vote. I'm expecting a nice dinner off you. I can't say I did in 2017 in the same ward. I didn't exactly sort of sweep to victory. I won by 67 votes. But as you all know, local politics, there isn't that many votes in the whole thing. That's my excuse. But it's been great. I've enjoyed it. But I've decided to get out. If I can close on this note, there are three things can happen to politicians. They can either be thrown out, they can either die in harness, or they can retire. And as you gather, I'm going for the 3rd option.
Well, I think on that note, we'll bring it to a close. And thank you again for what you said. It's been a fascinating talk and very, very good of you to share your experiences so frankly with us. That's been great.
Thank you.
That's all we've got time for this evening. I hope that the Friends can arrange other events later in the year, but that all depends on how we escape from lockdown. We'll keep you posted if and when other events come up. And finally, thank you all for listening and taking part. And also a very warm thank you to those who generously made a donation to the charity Friends of St. Lawrence for the talk. Thank you again, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, God bless.
Thank you very much, John and Carrie.
Thank you. Yeah, we really enjoyed it. It's been great. Surrounded by all our friends.
Thank you. Thank you.
He was gone.
I'm not sure. I'm just going to put 10 minutes.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Oh, that's nice.
Bye.
Oh, you're still there.
Right. Okay, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Au revoir. Au revoir.
Bye, John.
Bye. Bye.